that's a trick, and it's hard to get to that place sometimes. It's a talent, and it takes practice. The other thing that is important to keep in mind, especially if you're dealing with one of the aforementioned satanic spirits, is how to use a god form, how to manipulate a god form. They talk about this in the Golden Dawn documents. Basically, this is taking the image of the god and placing it astrally over yourself. And if you are actually dealing with what is essentially the corrupted reflection of that god, that's probably your best bet into terms of astral authority to be able to boss it around and tell it what to do. A lot of these things have controlling angels and controlling spirits and stuff like that, or demon kings that rule over them. So you want to know those names too, and you want to start, I'd say, as high up on the hierarchy as you can with divine names, god forms, stuff like that, and just work your way down the ranks. And this is till you're like right above whoever like the little boss of that particular demon is. And this is something that this is another cultural thing. They don't talk about it a lot in the Grimaric text because it's very obvious. Medieval society is a very hierarchical society. People are used to dealing with those hierarchies, and they're used to the idea that you go down the chain. Our society is kind of hostile to the idea of hierarchy, so we're kind of trained not to think that way. And these spirits do operate that way, so we do have to kind of remember to think this way. We're not just going to knock on the demon's door to get at it directly. We got to talk to its boss's boss's boss, and its boss's boss's boss, and so on and so forth. So all this basically boils down to having the right mindset. So all the tools that you have, however well prepared they are, and however well consecrated they are, however much time you spent building them, it's all going to be useless unless you can keep the right mindset, which partly can come down to inflaming yourself and praying and remembering the idea of hierarchy. But we're also dealing with demons which are by nature not, this is why, and we're going to talk about this in the idea of evil later, because I don't really think that I'm not describing them necessarily as malicious, but they are just by nature sneaky, manipulative, deceptive, passive-aggressive, bargaining. They want things from you, and they will try to trick you if they can to get it. They can be lazy. They'll try to get out of the things that you're trying to tell them to do. And dealing with these kind of entities can be very difficult. And a lot of the time, I find that encouraging people to try to learn how to do diabolic magic by talking to other occultists isn't necessarily helpful. There's a lot of people out there who talk a lot about this stuff and don't necessarily know a lot about this stuff. And there are people, too, who are perfectly capable of conjuring up a spirit and manifesting it, and they get really pleased with themselves because they can see it and they're interacting with it. It's obviously there. But maybe it's not doing what they want. And they're really just impressed by the fact that it's there at all, really. And very few people like to admit when their rituals are failing. So that can be a difficult thing as well. So the question, I would say actually that it's almost better to go outside of the occult community to find a good person to teach you about this, because there's all kinds of people who are used to dealing with sneaky, manipulative, passive-aggressive type of people. You got your cops, your high school teachers, your drug dealers, your bartenders, your TTC workers. These people can all inform you a great deal on how to deal with the craziness that comes with this kind of energy and these kind of ideas. And I would not even say, if you're going to pick someone's brain about this, you don't even have to tell them that you're doing it for an occult purpose. That might even get in the way of what they would be able to tell you that's useful. I mean, if you talk to a bartender about how they deal with the difficult customers, or you talk to a TTC worker about how they deal with pissed off drunk people on the night bus or whatever, those people can probably give you insights that are going to really help you in dealing with these kind of spirits in many ways more than people with occult trappings who sometimes just like to use a lot of words that they don't really know what they mean. The idea of the mindset is to keep the position of authority intact and your level of awareness intact. And that can be very difficult. This is why a lot of people like to work with partners. If you are going to work alone, I would say that you definitely want, you absolutely have to have someone you can bounce ideas off of, and it might be a good idea to find a way to, when you finish the ritual, it's not enough, well, there's some debate about whether you should actually vanish after a ritual like this or not. A lot of times when I'm cleaning up, I'll just invoke the ambient energy around me and carry it with me. But then I tend to go and do something else, something completely unrelated, something brainless. I'll go out to a bar and watch sports highlights with the sound off and you know, sit there and let the normal world wash over me again and get back into my right state of mind. Because, and I would especially advise not sleeping directly afterward, giving it time. Because when you're going to sleep, you're putting yourself in a bit of a vulnerable state. You already have kind of thrown up a bit of a flare on the astral plane. So even if you did your ritual correctly, you've attracted attention that wasn't there before. And that can go badly. And that brings us into the topic of the possessing spirits that I talked about before. There's a really good book that they actually sell here called Hostage to the Devil by Malachi Martin, who was a chief exorcist for the Catholic Church for a long time, Jesuit priest, performed hundreds of exorcisms. Now the book itself is like very much geared towards satanic panic. Which, you know, and if that bothers you, if that means you can't read it, then, well, tough, because it's better to read books by people who are hostile to what we're doing, I think. They have more things to teach us and more things to say than people who are just going to pat everyone on the back and say, this is great. But he definitely, he sensationalizes some of his stories. He doesn't really differentiate between astral phenomena and physical phenomena. And sometimes he outright lies. But in his lies, he definitely reveals a great deal about the way that these spirits interact. And for me, having read it, even with the fabrications and the over-elaborate stuff, I definitely got the sense that I was reading someone who actually was dealing with possessing spirits and demonic entities. The deal with these things tends to be, okay, well, now when we're employing the model of demon, this idea of a self-aware idea that's essentially a creation of fear, we can look at this a couple of different ways, and we can look at this as literally true, that it's sort of an inorganic being of some kind, or we can just look at it as maybe just a way of interpreting causality and reality. Both of those kind of go fairly. But one thing that I will say is that there is a strange relationship to time with these things. Martin kind of identifies that most of the subjects that he identified as being, severely possessed, it always starts when they're pretty young, and I'm not really sure whether that's actually something that happens when they're young, or just the fact that you're dealing with something that exists outside of time. So necessarily, if you fuck with it once, you fuck with it for your whole life, because it has access to your entire life as a single object, essentially. So identifying this is important, and this is why we come back to the idea of community and the idea of people around you that you can talk to who notice things going on with you, who can identify these things going on with you. And as far as exorcisms themselves, if someone doesn't know exactly what they're doing, I would say that to follow the Goetia step by step, or even to use the Roman Catholic ritual for exorcism step by step. It works, whether you get behind it or not. Whether you get behind the dogma behind it or not, you can still make it work for you. It will take some praying and some cleansing, but there's no reason that you can't go back to your life of sin afterward. Let's see. The
tradition.
yes, it is. Give yourself a little indulgence. So, to avoid this kind of problem, and to avoid the kind of static that generates cacodemons or those kind of difficulties, it's important to have properly prepared tools. So, this is how you make sure that you're getting the right spirit at the right place. And I mean, I said this before, but I'm going to emphasize it again. It's really important to be able to identify the spirit. That's a trick that isn't just about getting a sign. It also takes a lot of travel on the astral plane, so you can actually yourself be able to get a feel for the different kind of energies that you're dealing with, and it'll give you a sense of it. If you do a lot of astral work, and for example, you're used to exploring like the idea of Jupiter astrally, and then you invoke a demon that you know is supposed to have a Jupiterian nature, you should get a sense of familiarity. It should evoke the same kind of images that you would get when you are doing